You know, when it comes to buying real estate, there's this notion that a buyer has to have 20% down in order to buy a home. And to be honest with you, that is completely inaccurate. There's plenty of loans out there that will allow for you to buy a home with much less down. But in this video, I want to talk about several ways that you can buy a home here in Pennsylvania with no money down. That's right, you heard me, no money down. But do me a favor and stick around to the end because I want to talk a little bit about what exactly no money down means. Does that mean you can buy a house without having any money at all? Well, again, stick around to the end and I'll explain exactly what it means to buy a home with no money down and what that means to you financially. But before we get into that, I'm Chris Nelson with Gemstone Realty, and this channel is all about real estate advice, tips, and tech. So if any of that excites you, you're in the right place. But do me a favor, drop me a comment, hit that thumbs up, consider subscribing, and mash that bell so that you're notified of my future content. All right, folks, so today I'm gonna share with you 5 ways that you can buy a home here in Pennsylvania with no money down. Are you ready? So the first way that you can buy a home here in Pennsylvania with no money down actually is to borrow money. That's right, you can borrow money from friends, family members, or anyone who's willing to lend you money so that you can buy a home. What will be required is something referred to as a gift letter. A gift letter is a letter that says that person A is going to be gifting the money to person B being the buyer, so that they could use those funds towards their down payment. Now, depending on the amount being gifted, there could be some taxation in there, but keep in mind at the end of the day, if you have someone willing to lend you money to buy a home, you definitely can do that with a little bit of documentation. So if you have some friends or parents with deep pockets, now might be the time to let them know you need some cash. Another way to buy a property with no money down is to find a property that is actually being seller financed. Now, when you find a property that is being seller financed, which they are few and far between, but these opportunities do exist. And the way that transaction works looks a little bit like this. You will find a home that actually is being sold where the seller is telling you that they are willing to create some type of seller financing. At that point, you will go and determine what those terms look like. And if they're willing to sell you the home with no money down, well, really what you're looking at that point is your principal, which is going to be 100% or maybe even more, since they're going to finance the deal and not require for you to put a down payment. But your principal, again, should be about 100% of the sale price or more, and your interest. And it should be calculated and amortized, meaning you know every payment you make, what that balance of that loan will come down to. This is something that you get when you have a traditional mortgage, and you want to make sure that it is recorded. You want to make sure that when you go to sell the property or refinance, there's language there that is cut and dry to both buyer and seller or borrower and lender, so that there's no hiccups down the road. Another way to obtain a property without putting any money down is to find a home that's being sold where the owner of that home has a mortgage that is assumable. Now, again, these aren't opportunities that are out there in abundance, but they do exist. As a matter of fact, the first property that I ever purchased came with a mortgage that was assumable. So if I ever decided to sell my property and I had a buyer, I could actually give them my loan where those terms would then just transfer over. So in theory, they would be taking over the balance and they would be maintaining those payments, but it would come out of my name and be put in theirs. Now, when you find a property where the mortgage is assumable, keep in mind that you still need to qualify for those terms. The seller can't just say, here's the mortgage, without actually having you go through and apply. So if you are creative enough and you are out there searching, keep in mind that you might want to ask the seller if they're willing to finance the deal, because it might be a way for you to save money and not put anything down. So this next one shouldn't come at a surprise, because the last few videos I've done spoke about grants. And there are tons of grants out there that apply to most of the mortgages out there, FHA, conventional, the list goes on, that will allow for you to bridge that gap for what is required for your down payment, so that you are, in theory, getting 100% financing. Now, in this market, grants may not be the most attractive to sellers because sellers are looking at multiple offers and they're going with the ones that have the least contingencies. the least amount of hurdles that stand between that property and it making it to the settlement table. So grants, although phenomenal, may not be your best bet in 2021, but if you find the right property and the right seller and you're a first-time home buyer, keep in mind that grants are a great way to buy a property with no money down. And the fifth and final way that you can buy a property here in Pennsylvania is by the actual mortgage. Yes, there are a couple mortgages that apply here in Pennsylvania that right off of the bat are 100% financing, and one of them is not specific to the state. It is specific to veterans. So if you are a veteran, first, thank you dearly for your service, but you're in luck because the VA loan allows for you to take out a mortgage and not have to worry about any down payment. It is 100% financing because, well, we appreciate you and you deserve it. Another one is a USDA loan. And a USDA loan is a loan that is very common here in Pennsylvania, but not to every market in Pennsylvania. In order to qualify or in order to get a USDA loan, you must buy a property that is in a specific area, and that area needs to be a rural development. Rural areas are determined by the amount of occupancy or homes in that area. If the overall number of homes is underneath the threshold and meets the USDA guidelines, then you can apply for a USDA loan, which works very much like an FHA or a VA loan, where they do have some other moving mechanics when it comes to the appraisal, but guess what? It's 100% financing, right? So there you have it. There are 5 ways where you can buy a home here in Pennsylvania with no money down. But what I want to talk to you about before you go, so stick with me, is that no money down does not mean that you buy a property with no money out of pocket. For the most part, buyers tend to think that closing costs and down payment are one and the same. They are not. And I'm going to explain using a little example. Let's say you were purchasing a home for $100,000 and your mortgage is for 95% of that, meaning you're required to put down 5% or $5,000. Now, if you were to get a grant or maybe even use a USDA loan or a VA loan, you wouldn't be required to put down that 5% or that $5,000. So that's your down payment. However, when you buy a home, you have closing costs, and your closing costs are made up of several things. Some of them are going to be title services and title fees. You are also going to have lender required escrows. Because your lender is going to be paying your taxes, they want to collect that money up front. So when you go to settlement, they're going to be taking the taxes for the following year at the time of closing. This creates a security blanket for them so that they know the taxes will be paid and not late without penalty, so that they're at no risk. You will also be paying the seller back for the taxes that they've already paid out for the year. Most situations, taxes are paid from January 1st to the last day of the year. Now, school taxes are a little bit different, where they run from the middle of the year to the middle of the year, but the seller's gonna wanna be paid back for any taxes that they've paid out from the day that you're taking settlement on, because at that point you're the homeowner. So these are some of the things that will actually fall into your closing cost. So no matter what, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, if you plan on buying a home, you will need to save some money, but we can help keep those costs down if we find a way to get you 100% financing. So there you have it, folks. Hopefully you found some value to this video. Once again, I'm Chris Nelson with Gemstone Realty. Do me a favor, check in next week for the very next Just a Tip Tuesday with Chris. Until then, take care.